Man, it hurts even now. You know, it's like touching a sore and it started bleeding again. After they died, it simply dropped back to me and ended up back with me. Gerald Levert was more than just another R&B artist, you know. He possessed immense power. He had an illustrious career while carrying a hefty legacy as the son of soul superstar Eddie Levert. However, beneath the celebrity lay a man who was dealing with stress, heartache, and suffering. Few people ever saw it. Gerald's biography was replete with unseen struggles, ranging from his convoluted romantic life to the emotional strain of providing for his whole family. The music industry was shocked when his life abruptly ended at the age of 40. Join us as we reveal the devastating reality of Gerald Levert's ascent, hardships, and untimely demise. On July 13, 1966, Gerald Edward Levert was born in Cleveland, Ohio, to Eddie and Martha Levert. His dad wasn't your typical parent. The legendary frontman of the OJS, the only band responsible for hits like Love Train, Backstabbers, and Stairway to Heaven, was Eddie Levert. Gerald was up surrounded by music because of that kind of tradition. The Levert family led a comfortable life. Living in the suburbs of Cleveland, young Gerald frequently traveled with his father and the OJS. Gerald quickly became enamored with music after being surrounded by the cadences and routines of traveling life. His goal was to become like his father. Eddie wasn't excited about the concept at first. He wished his son would make a more secure decision, perhaps enroll in college and establish a peaceful, typical life away from the hectic world of music. Gerald, however, was unwavering, and his perseverance finally wore his father down. Eddie started purchasing drums, other instruments, and eventually a piano for his kid in order to encourage his love. Gerald, meanwhile, had little interest in the piano. He simply didn't connect with it. When a new person entered the picture, that altered. A musically talented acquaintance from their Jehovah's Witness community, Mark Gordon, emerged as a significant figure in the Levert household. Because Mark lived with them for a while, many people thought he was family, but he was only a close acquaintance who loved music. With Mark's innate musical ability, he and Gerald quickly started writing and producing songs with Gerald's younger brother, Sean. Although Sean's heart wasn't in it like Gerald's, he joined in and had a wonderful voice. Sean was more concerned with supporting his older brother than pursuing his own goals. In their basement studio, the group would spend hours writing songs and lyrics. When they presented their music to Eddie, however, he continued to be doubtful. He didn't think they were ready, so he would frequently listen and just say, "That's not it." But in the end, their efforts were fruitful. Gerald's father took notice of something he wrote. Eddie heard the promise this time. In an attempt to bring Gerald's group in front of the appropriate individuals, he started requesting favors. However, there was still another challenge. Business leaders repeatedly remarked that Gerald sounded too much like his father. Sadly, Gerald found it difficult to break out because Eddie's voice was among the most identifiable in soul music. They were rejected by label after label, claiming they didn't require another Eddie Levert. They eventually brought their music to Philadelphia International Records, the same label that helped start the OJS. Feeling frustrated but not defeated, Gerald Levert's first major break came in 1985 because of his father's extensive connections in the music industry. Eddie Levert utilized his connections to get his son a record deal with Tempe Records, a minor company based in Cleveland. Gerald's band, Levert, published their first album, I Get Hot, that year, but the label lacked the means and reach to adequately promote it, and it didn't do very well outside of their local scene. When the group left Tempe and signed with Atlantic Records, a major company that provided them with the necessary national exposure, everything changed. The release of Pop 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 Goes My Mind marked their rapid breakthrough. Their first #1 hit was Levert. The group gained popularity thanks to the catchy hit, and all eyes were on them at once. They had the crossover hit Casanova on their follow-up album, The Big Throwdown, in 1987. Casanova's sophisticated production and pop-friendly sound helped it reach #1 in the US and make it into the UK's top 10. Levert became well known worldwide thanks to that song. Furthermore, not everyone is aware that Levert was a real character in New Jack City, even though most people remember it for its grim tale. Troop and Levert were two of the groups who were featured in the famous footage where they were harmonizing around trash can fires. A little slice of R&B history, but a blink and you'll miss it moment. With their 1988 album Just Coolin', which had a title track featuring Heavy D, the popularity continued. To Heavy D's surprise, the song became his only #1 hit, which was a significant accomplishment given his legendary standing in the hip-hop industry. In addition, Just Coolin' won a Soul Train Music Award for Favorite Group, solidifying their status as one of the most popular R&B acts of the time. Behind the scenes, however, Gerald, 21, was beginning to give way under the strain. The reporter who interviewed him for the La Times that year said he was obviously running on fumes and was hardly conscious. "Somebody please take it. Save me from all these hassles. Being well known is a pain," Gerald admitted. "I like to remain anonymous." Although he acknowledged that his father had forewarned him about the drawbacks of celebrity, he never thought it would be this overwhelming. He was so exhausted that he even asked the reporter, "Are you sure you don't want to switch jobs with me?" before the interview finished. Gerald discussed the emotional toll in a book that he and his father, Eddie, co-wrote. Every member of the family appeared to rely on him and his father for financial, emotional, and spiritual support. He claimed that all he ever wanted was for someone to inquire about his health and well-being without making a request or asking for a favor. Gerald continued, however. Levert released Just Coolin', another gold-certified album, in 1988. Their fifth album, Rope a Dope Style, which had the #1 single, Baby, I'm Ready, was then published in 1990. Gerald was prepared to venture out by this time, though. Gerald Levert began to sense that a solo career was calling. More and more people were telling him that he didn't need a group because he had the charisma and the voice. On his own, he was a star. That change in emphasis began to cause friction, particularly between Gerald and Mark Gordon. Not only was Mark a bandmate, he was almost like family. They had grown up as brothers, met at church, and experienced the same path from basement jams to national renown. Mark, however, felt the sting as Gerald started to slip away. He later talked about feeling abandoned in interviews. Additionally, Gerald's brother Sean accompanied him when he moved away from Levert. Sean never had the same drive as Gerald, despite having a wonderful voice. Supporting his older brother was always his top priority. Sean merely responded, "If he's out, I'm out too," when Gerald departed. Gerald Levert's relationship with Mark Gordon soured after he quit the organization. For years, the two did not communicate. Gerald felt he had no alternative but to move away from Levert and his brothers, even if it hurt. His dream was to perform alone. Leaving the group's comfort zone was necessary for him to leave his own legacy. In actuality, though, Gerald had already begun to take that course prior to the formal break. Working with artists such as Men at Large, the Rude Boys, Patti Leal, and even the renowned Teddy Pendergrass. He was transitioning into the production industry. He was demonstrating his versatility behind the scenes. He was able to mold sounds. Gerald's solo career was gaining momentum. His duet with his father, Eddie Levert, titled "Baby Hold On to Me," was one of his greatest hits. It quickly rose to the top. It was an opportunity for Eddie, who hadn't had a big hit in years, to re-establish a connection with his fans via his son. It was a proud moment for Gerald, connecting generations of soul music. Gerald was like a fire during the 1990s. The R&B charts were dominated by songs like Thinking About It, Taking Everything, and Mr. Too Damn Good to You. Hit after hit, he was going platinum, going gold. He was no longer only the son of Eddie Levert. He was a powerful individual in his own way. He released the album G, which included Mr. Too Damn Good to You in 2000. In addition to adding another prize to his already full shelf, it went gold. Gerald Levert frequently put his heart into love songs and was well known for his emotional lyrics and soulful voice. Offstage, however, his personal romantic life was much more nuanced than any ballad. He once claimed that not singing one of his father's songs was one of the most romantic things a woman could do for him. The fact that it was merely asking, "Are you okay?" demonstrated real concern, which meant more to him than any publicity. Actress Kim Whitley and Gerald had been friends since they were young. Long before romance entered the scene, they were friends, having grown up in the same Shaker Heights neighborhood in Ohio. Kim even disclosed that she was the inspiration for his 1988 song "Addicted to You," describing him as her first real love. However, there were difficulties in their relationship. Despite her parents' advice not to date a musician, Kim went with her gut. Gerald made it obvious that there could only be one star in a relationship if they were together, even if he supported her to pursue her aspirations in Hollywood. He desired a spouse who would stay at home and provide for the family, much like his mother did. There were frequent splits and reconciliations as a result of such expectation. They stayed close no matter how difficult the path became. Kim even described how, during parties, she would become envious if other women approached him too closely. Evidence that the emotions never truly went away. When comedian Monique showed interest in Gerald years later, she politely requested Kim's approval. Whatever transpired between Gerald and Monique didn't last, but Kim gave it. Like Kim, Monique continued to be his buddy and eventually provided assistance to his family. Kim disclosed that she had once made a deal with Gerald. Gerald never reached the age of 50, but if neither of them was married by then, they would get married. Gerald fell in love with Mickey Howard, another R&B powerhouse in the late 1980s. Having connections to Jehovah's Witnesses, they connected over their shared beliefs. From a passionate beginning, their relationship developed into a solid musical collaboration. They collaborated to create the popular duet, "That's What Love Is," in 1987. However, not everyone was in favor of the partnership. In Gerald's unsung episode, Mickey revealed how Gerald was under pressure to leave her when people chastised her for being a single mother. He finally expressed their worries to her, telling her that he didn't want a prefabricated family. One of Mickey's more problematic instances throughout their time together is shown in the 2016 film Love Under New Management. In one scenario, Gerald has taken a combination of prescription medications and is found asleep in the restroom. She was enough worried to call his mother, but he played it down. He was incensed when he heard. Mickey claims that soon after that incident, their relationship terminated. Mickey got married to someone else less than 2 months later, but their union didn't appear to endure. Nevertheless, she and Gerald continued to communicate and even collaborated on another duet. Gerald continued to be a part of Mickey's life even though she was pregnant by someone else at the time. Gerald always envisioned a conventional partner, someone more like his mother than the ladies he was attracted to. As she later verified, just as Kim had. Gerald was adored by followers worldwide, despite his desire for traditional love. Women fell in love with him. Bras and even granny panties would frequently be strewn all over the stage during his performances. He was R&B's teddy bear. Gerald has 2 children in 1990. His son Lamika and daughter Caressia were born to separate ladies only 3 days apart. This naturally resulted in what he referred to as baby mama drama. Kim continued to be a reliable confidant throughout it all. Gerald frequently contacted her to whine about his children's moms as well as his girlfriends. Kim previously disclosed on her podcast that he even got engaged once and would call her to gripe about his fiancée. That woman's identity is still unknown. She was still alive too, Mickey. They will get back in touch anytime they were in the same place, she assured interviewer Storm Monroe. She implied that they had an unwritten agreement. Don't tell, don't ask. Their children would spend time together as a single, large family. Mickey also declared her love for all of Gerald's children's mothers. She claimed that he had a strong sense of ethics and chose some very lovely women. I adore them. Yes, I do. Cameron, Gerald's 3rd child, was born in 1998. Another woman, another chapter, another attempt to create something enduring while pursuing something ephemeral. Gerald Levert's musical career was still flourishing by 2002. He launched his album, The G-Spot, that year, and Karine Steffans, later notoriously known as Superhead, played his on-screen romantic interest in the music video for the song Funny. No one was certain whether romance occurred behind the scenes, despite speculation circulating about the nature of their relationship. Gerald first met Candy Burrus, the singer and songwriter for the R&B group Xscape, in February 2003. Candy was parenting her baby daughter Riley at the time, in addition to establishing a lucrative solo career. Gerald and Candy developed a close bond in spite of their hectic schedules. It's You, a duet that encapsulated their romance, was a song they co-wrote that same year. Candy humorously sung about Gerald's arrogant, brazen demeanor and how much she valued his affection for her daughter in the song's lyrics. Gerald spoke of her independence, her ability to manage the drama of being a baby mama, and how her folks treated him like family, all while delivering his trademark soulful delivery. He sung, "The way you came and made my house a home, I adore every aspect of you." Regretfully, the song was never included on an album and was not made available for almost 20 years. According to people close to the pair, they were together for 2 years before splitting up. Straight from the A claims that a conflict in lifestyles was the main cause of the split. Gerald desired a conventional spouse who, like his mother, would remain at home and raise the kids. However, neither was prepared to alter their course because Candy was a very independent and career-driven individual. The love remained despite the split. Candy maintained a close relationship with Gerald's children and even maintained contact with some of his relatives. Gerald appeared on MTV's My Super Sweet 16 in 2005 to celebrate the birthday of his daughter Carilzia. He acknowledged that the appearance was an error in his co-written memoir. The mothers of his other children were incensed by the show's overblown depiction, which gave the impression that he had spent $2 million in the celebration. They believed that their own kids weren't being treated fairly. Gerald considered how his strained connections with some of the mothers also affected his children. One even complained to his mother over the phone, which Gerald found quite offensive. He wrote that bringing my mother into my issue was the one thing he couldn't stand. Gerald made an effort to modify his life in the same year that his relationship with Candy terminated. To get healthier, he signed up for a wellness and weight loss program. However, he suffered an Achilles tendon rupture after falling during the program. Gerald's leg was in a full cast, and he was expected to need some time off to recover. However, he hurried his recuperation to return to the stage because so many people depended on him for financial support. Unsung claims that he employed innumerable friends, relatives, and even complete strangers. He provided loans, paid other people's expenses, and helped others in ways that most people were unaware of. But his body suffered as a result. He started using a combination of prescription and over-the-counter drugs to get any sleep as pain became a daily struggle. People in his immediate vicinity began to notice a change in him, both emotionally and physically. Gerald was starting to think back on his life and own up to his mistakes. Kim Whitley disclosed in a podcast interview that Gerald once acknowledged he felt bad about having 3 children from 3 separate women. His memoir contained that same admission. He characterized himself as self-centered, wanting to come and go as he pleased without taking into account his partner's or children's emotional needs. He was so preoccupied with money at one point that he didn't pay attention to any discussion that didn't entail making more of it. But as he grew older, his viewpoint shifted. He realized he wanted a joyful marriage after seeing 2 of his siblings get married. He even expressed in his writing that he wished he had held off on getting sexual till after marriage. The fact that his children were dispersed throughout the nation by moms who had moved on and taken on new men was one of his greatest regrets. He wrote, "I wish there was a law because I get mad. The children shouldn't be taken from their father by a woman." Gerald Levert continued to release albums between 2001 and 2004, but none of them had a significant impact. The music scene was rapidly changing. A more polished pop-driven sound was displacing R&B. The charts were dominated by artists like Justin Timberlake and Usher, and Gerald's soulful, deep voice didn't match the mold that the business was aiming for. Behind the scenes, things worsened, according to his family. His label began critiquing him personally as well as his music. They argued that his voice was too strong, his timbre too soulful, and his weight too heavy for mainstream pop. They gradually started to doubt him. Rejection and pressure struck hard. Gerald became depressed. He put on weight. Neither did he feel or look like himself. Even his father, Eddie Levert, apologized in subsequent interviews, questioning whether he had done more harm than good by bringing Gerald into the music business. Gerald nevertheless made an effort to defend himself. He made the decision to prioritize his health. In an attempt to regain control and feel better, he checked himself into a weight loss camp. However, he suffered a severe injury that altered everything when he tore his ACL during a volleyball match. Gerald hurried back to performing despite being prescribed medicines to aid in his recuperation. He believed he had no other option. He was his family's main source of income by that point. His children said he was very giving. He managed bills, purchased automobiles, and paid rent. Everyone in his 21-person entourage looked up to him. Gerald continued to push himself despite the physical toll the stress was having on him. Then catastrophe struck on November 10, 2006. One of Gerald Levert's relatives discovered him unconscious in bed. A deadly cocktail of over-the-counter and prescription pharmaceuticals had killed him. He had just turned 40. Gerald Levert suffered from sleeplessness for years, according to his daughters. He frequently drank NyQuil to get some sleep and was excessively dependent on drugs like Ambient and Advil. He appeared to be merely attempting to cope. But one night, a combination of the wrong drugs and maybe a little bit of bad luck put an end to it all. One of the most influential R&B voices in the world passed away. Additionally, Eddie Levert, his father, could not endure the agony. In addition to being his son, Gerald was also his friend and musical collaborator. In subsequent interviews, Eddie would express regret and wonder if he had taken a risk by introducing Gerald to the music industry. The guilt persisted even though it wasn't his fault. When Gerald died, he was just 40 years old. Already, the anguish was unfathomable. However, the Levert family's heartache wasn't over yet. Eddie and Martha Levert lost their other son, Sean, in 2008, barely 2 years after Gerald's passing, along with more than $90,000 in delinquent child support for 3 of his 6 children. Sean received a sentence of over 2 years in prison. That March, Sean carried a prescription for Xanax, which he used to relieve his anxiety, to the Cleveland jail. However, it was seized by the guards upon admission. According to a fellow prisoner, Sean first appeared positive, but in a matter of hours, he was sweating profusely, confused, and experiencing hallucinations. He begged the guards to give him his medicine, but they wouldn't. Sean was eventually strapped into a chair for restraint. He was taken to a hospital when his respiration stopped, and at the age of 39 he passed away. Complications from diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, pneumonia, and Xanax withdrawal were stated as the cause. Sean's widow filed a wrongful death case and won $4 million, but no criminal charges were brought. The loss of both boys still weighs heavily on Eddie Levert. In an interview with Ebony, he acknowledged that he occasionally questions whether he made a mistake and whether he should have avoided exposing them to the harsh realities of the music industry at such a young age. Dedication in honor of Gerald and Sean is the album that Mark and Black Rose published in 2009. Later, they brought on Paris Smith as a third member, and they briefly carried on as Levert the Two. Paris is currently a part of the Rad & B group as yet. Finally, 2 years after Sean's passing, the tragedy had a positive outcome. In an effort to stop the very neglect that ultimately led to Sean's death, the state of Ohio implemented Shaw's legislation in 2020, which mandates that all jails have explicit protocols in place for inmates experiencing substance withdrawal. R&B was devastated by the deaths of Gerald and Shaw Levert, and the grief only got worse when their mother Martha died in January 2020. Gerald Levert might not always receive the recognition he merits. However, his legacy is profound. Fortunately, programs such as Unsung have served to remind people of his story. After he passed away, the ideal he had pursued his entire life finally materialized in a tragic twist. Gerald Levert's CD. In My Songs earned him a Grammy in 2008. The world finally gave him the accolades he had always earned, but he wasn't here to take it. One of the most soulful voices in music was lost when Gerald Levert died. However, the pain was much more profound for his family. Cameron, his daughter, is one of the people remaining to continue his torch. He embodies his image not only in appearance, but also in his love of music. Cameron has dedicated her life to preserving the musical heritage of the Levert family. Music is in her blood, just like her grandfather Eddie and father Gerald. And in 2018 she made a daring move by paying a moving homage to the guy who started it all. Cameron's first single, I Miss You, a sentimental and intimate song devoted to her father, was published that year. Intimate family portraits and footage of Gerald transforming the song into a heartfelt homage were featured in the accompanying film. It was more than simply a song to Cameron. It was a message to her father informing him that she was continuing his legacy. She said in an Instagram post that she had begun writing music 2 years earlier. But I Miss You stood out as one of her best works, and she isn't going through this path alone. Eddie Levert, her grandfather, continues to be a pillar of support and wisdom, knowing that he would always be honest with her, even if it means telling her a song isn't ready. Cameron frequently plays her new music for him first. Singing for her father before he died is one of her favorite memories. We might have something here, he replied with a smile, and she still remembers that moment. She finds peace in the knowledge that he recognized her potential. Years later, Cameron is still developing as a musician, but more significantly, she is preserving her father's legacy with each note she sings, her love, and her music. Her relationship with Gerald endures, and she makes sure the Levert heritage is remembered with each new song. Like a Levert, Gerald Levert's other kid has developed into a guy who not only looks like his well-known father, but also exudes the same calm strength and devotion. Despite leading a rather quiet existence, Lamika has occasionally taken center stage, particularly when it comes to celebrating his father's legacy. Gerald was a loving father to Lamika at home when he wasn't performing or creating songs. They had a close relationship, and Laika has carried on Gerald's legacy for years after his death in 2006. When Lama openly supported family friend Monique, it was one instance that demonstrated his character. The Oscar-winning actress, who cited unfair treatment and salary difference as reasons for her decision to boycott Netflix, had received a lot of anger. Laika defended her position in the face of widespread criticism. On social media, he disclosed that Monique had been a tremendous help to his family throughout the years, particularly following Gerald's passing. He called her one of the few people who actually cared when the cameras weren't filming, and thanked her for always being there for them. Even though Lamika would rather avoid the spotlight, his infrequent public remarks uphold the principles his father instilled in him. Family comes first, loyalty, and respect. Additionally, he is a living reminder of the soul icon who reared him in both appearance and heart. The biography of Gerald Levert is one of incredible ability, passionate music, and unspeakable public and personal suffering. His journey from #1 on the charts to silently overcoming heartache, pressure, and health issues serves as a reminder that even the most successful people may